How's it going, Andrew?
What's going on, homie?
Same old, same old. Living the dream, one nightmare at a time.
Another fun-filled and interesting day in Freemasonry. Am I right?
Another fun-filled and exciting day.
That's the line. Absolutely. So how things been going, homie? What you been up to?
Working out, prepping, lots of prep work for the upcoming year. Yeah, that's about it. Masonry, lots of masonry. Did a lot of masonry over the weekend. Going to a couple of degrees the day after this airs. So yeah, been masonry filled.
So I, on the other hand, have just been chilling.
Well, not exactly, but as much as a worshipful master can, yes.
Compared to you, I feel like chilling. Compared to what you're up to, I feel pretty chill. So, fun. How long was our meeting on Thursday?
3 hours and 40 minutes.
So that was a cool meeting.
Finished closing at 2 hours and 40 minutes. 2 hours and 40 minutes. Correction. That's a big correction. 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah, that was a long one. And, I will say,
Yeah.
I don't want to say that I take all the blame because there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't just not do. But boy, oh boy, by the end of it, even I was like, what am I doing anymore?
Well, and, you had some jerk take up a good chunk of the meeting presenting about the cost of a new roof on the building and which contractor we should go with and what they would all do.
Which is a pretty good lead-in to what we're going to talk about today. But yeah, it definitely, to be fair, Jeff was like, you should have just cut education, man. And I was like, no, I'll never cut education. We're just going to suffer. That's how it's going to work. We start with education, so it's the most enjoyable. And the goal is that the crappy stuff that we don't want to do anyways at the end, we should have been faster. But we had important things to talk about, so there was nothing we could really do about it. But yeah, my brain turned into a static TV about after hour 2, and I was trying to keep the wheels on the cart.
The main meeting is always one of those longer ones. And it especially depends on how many resolutions you have coming up for annual communication, because those have to be read. And then, unfortunately, those perfect storms happen every now and then where you get a presentation about spending a boatload of money on a roof, combined with resolutions, combined with other conversations that have to be had, and you're like, oh, this just spiraled real fast.
Yeah, definitely spiraled. But the thing is, there's this trend that I was noticing that we stopped somewhere along the line having our secretary read all the communications and kind of just summarize them. And while I like that we're being conscious of time, and I agree with that. Also, listening to the communications when I was a younger officer was sometimes my favorite part of the thing. I like hearing what the things coming when we get templegrams and stuff. I get it. We don't need to read the whole templegram, but the communications, I really don't think we should be or are even allowed to just summarize a letter from the Grand Lodge, right? I feel like we got to read those, and I like when they're read. So. But isn't that an official communication?
Should be.
So it's an official communication. They're saying, I'm sending word to you and your members, so it needs to be read, right?
Yes. However, when it comes to reading the budget resolution, we all know what that's going to be, right? Here's what the total amount of money the Grand Lodge wants to spend this year is. Nobody's going to sit there and read an Excel document line by line.
No, I agree. But that's why I didn't feel bad that I went through the resolutions, because I think it's important that our members do, even if they don't want to read themselves, hear it and have the opportunity to give their input on it, because ultimately these decisions being made will affect their lives in certain circumstances. So I think it's important.
Mm-hmm. Right, for sure.
But let's go. Like when I bring my dog to lodge and say he's a service animal, and we just send it.
Yeah.
He's a male and freeborn.
He's not a service animal. We all know.
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't want to take advantage of that either, but it is a fun joke. But yeah, it's awesome. I had fun.
All right. It was a good meeting. We don't go long often, and when we do, it's necessary and productive. So,
Ooh.
You get 2 meetings a year that get to go along. You get May and November, resolutions and elections.
And we got to congratulate our boy right here for being Mason of the Year for District 12 here in Wisconsin. Ooh.
Whatever.
The golf claps.
I don't do it for the awards.
Awesome. Well, congratulations.
I don't do it for the awards. I do it for the craft.
I still had to shout you out. It was your hard work, you little busy bee. But all right, we'll hit it. And today we have a fun topic to discuss.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right. So we are back here, and today I have a topic that came to mind because I was reading a post on the Freemasonry subreddit. Essentially, it was a dude who was asking a question: are Masonic buildings a positive, or are they bringing the craft down? So we opened that up to a bunch of people to comment on what their thoughts were. And I was reading it, I went, I do have a lot of opinions on this, and it'd be kind of fun to talk about on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. It could be totally fun and not controversial at all.
Well, the key is, I feel like what I enjoyed about it, even the comments, is there's strong pros and strong cons to both. And so it is kind of, I don't think there's a wrong answer on it. There is just different things.
No, I would agree with you. Everybody has widely varying opinions when it comes to building ownership and being part of a lodge that does own their building. I have wildly varying opinions on owning a building every day.
Yeah, every single ceiling tile I replace, I start to wonder. But I mean, that the interesting point, though, is so as members of a lodge, unless you are part of the physical purchasing of a building or the setting up of a building, essentially this responsibility is something we inherit. You join, and inevitably it falls in your lap somewhere in your Masonic career that you're like, this building you guys own in collective. Well, and underneath the Grand Lodge and all that good stuff. But, in practice, your lodge is the one who oversees. If they own the building, is the one that oversees it. It's not something that we necessarily choose. It just happens. And so with that, it's kind of like we don't always get to choose the relationship we have. We have to make do with what the situation is. And that, I would say, is the truth for whether you own a building or you're renting a building. It's something that you kind of just get laid in front of you and you have to figure out how to operate within it. So what do you think owning a building does for, say, a lodge's identity in the community or their identity with themselves?
Well, so starting off, first of all, as opposed to like renting like a church basement or something like that, it's likely more so going to make your presence known in the community more, as you have your logos outside, your name. You could possibly do signage about events you got going on. It's something you can rent out potentially to people if that's something your lodge chooses to do, which just inherently makes it feel like, part of the community as far as the building goes. And, if you maintain it well, it should be something that people are proud of to see in their community and everything else, not something that's run down, hopefully, but that becomes part of the problem, right, with the finance aspect of owning a building. As far as like what it provides for your lodge is it feels like you have like a clubhouse, like a home. Like you're not worried about it necessarily, like, oh, we could move anytime we want. Not really, it's not like renting an apartment, right? This is your home. This is your place, and it also creates a sense of responsibility and stewardship to those that came before you that initially got the building or constructed the building.
Yeah, I do agree that one of the things I'll put on the pro side to ownership versus renting is if you are an owner, you have an element of control over the calendar is huge. You're not going to pay additional expenses. I think one of the cons that I hear about from lodges that rent buildings is they can get nickeled and dimed at times for like, hey, let's say their contract for the rental includes their stated meeting night and then a couple of extra meetings, and anything after that they have to pay for. So if, they suddenly have a bunch of guys try to join the lodge and that's going to go over maybe their foreseen amount, it's suddenly another expense. So you're having this candidate pay to join the craft, and then you're just taking that payment and putting it into the rental of the space to then do the degree for them. And so a lot of lodges make, a decent, not decent, but a portion of their budget comes from degree fees, and it can be a nice bump because we put degree fees on our degrees, and that can be a nice bit of revenue for doing all that work. And if you have to immediately turn it around and put it into a rental, that'd kind of be a bummer. But then if I say that paying for the rental's expensive, I also have to acknowledge that paying to maintain the building is probably significantly more expensive.
Well, I mean, it all depends like where you're at in the maintenance of the building and what you're garnering from rental fees, right? Are your rental fees enough to reasonably cover your monthly expenses and stuff, and maybe put some aside for future maintenance projects that are going to happen, which I think a lot of times building owners shortchange themselves on. In masonry, we try to be very generous and very accommodating to our renters, or fellow building users. Let's not call them renters. Let's call them fellow building users.
Pay mate.
Right, exactly. So, I think we're very accommodating and very generous at times, and I think sometimes that can come back to kind of bite us as major expenses rack up. But yeah, there are pros and cons to both sides, right? Paying rent sucks, and or paying maintenance fees sucks, whatever you want to call it, and paying very, very large energy bill in the middle of winter in Wisconsin to heat a huge building also sucks.
Yeah, I think one thing when I was reading those comments that dawned on me is, excuse me, is like if you think about it though, depending on the size of the building, right? So if you have a lodge that has 30 members and they're in a building that was built during the golden age of fraternalism and it can seat 400, the building itself is immense, and so it can actually become an undoable situation pretty quickly depending on what building you're left with, right? So like if we were just a lodge and we owned the Triple I Shrine, we would be having a hard time. You know what I mean? Some of those, or if you look at like the Oshkosh building, massive, gorgeous building, you could do a lot in there. It could be very hard for a small group of men to maintain something of that size. So I think there is something that's worth weighing in on. It can be hard to own a building unless you have enough infrastructure to do it. And I also don't think there's any shame in being a renter, because I think if you look at the history of the craft, the lodges used to meet above taverns. I mean, our lodge was founded at Puddler's Hall, and we used to meet in a Puddler's building. So I think there is no issue with being a renter. We've always said there's two types of lodges. Lodges that have money and lodges that own buildings. And so I think there's something to be said. What would you say? Do you think that owning a building can distract from doing the work of Freemasonry because we're focused on doing the work of maintaining a building?
I would say in the wrong lodge, yes. A lodge that either A, doesn't have the resources in membership to focus clearly on both, and people are getting way burnt out because they're having to spend so much time on both things that they can't do either thing properly. I can see that becoming a problem. Or like if somebody got left a building that was in disrepair, that it consumes so much of their time to fix, I could also see that being a problem. But for the most part, in a healthy, well-functioning lodge, I don't think owning a building takes away from the other work that you do.
So I somewhat agree, but I somewhat disagree that I think that even if the building, I'm not saying that by focusing on the building you do anything wrong, but there's always going to be a divided attention then. Like, instead of us doing a education night, we're doing a put ceiling tiles in night. You know what I mean? So there is a trade-off always being made if you're looking at like the law of equivalent exchange. Like, you're going to be making exchange. Now, I will argue that in the process of maintaining a building with brothers, there is some Masonic learning that happens as far as being diligent, learning to work as a team, improving your skill set. There are unintended benefits, without a doubt. But, I could see how, as a renter, it would be nice that you have a predictable, hopefully mostly predictable rent. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So you could, if you took advantage of it, you could really put all your energy into focus on masonry stuff exclusively, which could definitely be a nice benefit, I feel like.
Yes, I mean, you can focus on masonry stuff exclusively, but you still have to play the game of, well, can we get this night to do this event? Can we get that night to do this event? Has somebody else booked it? Oh, this broke. Can somebody from the building owners come and fix it? You don't have like the control over it to just be like, oh, this broke. All right, let's go fix it right now. Or, well, we want to do this on this night, so we're just going to go ahead because we own the building and there's nothing else on the calendar, and we know that, right? So I think renting can also take away from some of the work, even though you might not have to like physically work on a building or work on monetarily supporting a building. You do still have concerns about how much your maintenance fees are going to be and how that's going to impact your budget, or if they're going to be raised, or if the building owner is going to sell the building, or if you're going to have availability, or if there's going to be availability for the nights you want it. There's a different set of concerns that go into that aspect of it.
Yeah,
Always having to ask permission to do something.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think what I like about the fact that both exist is, if you think of craft lodges, a lodge wasn't a building, it was a group of men. They would set up a camp, and then that would be where the lodge would meet, and they'd go to work. And so there is something that's cool when, I feel like, if you're a renting lodge, with your ability to be mobile. If the lodge gets really big, you can rent a new space. If the lodge gets really small, you could rent and move to a different space. You could, adjust for how you want to a certain extent, which I think is the mobility and the flexibility, I think, is something that's really cool with renting lodges. Whereas I think one of the drawbacks that can be hard is if you're not renting or doing a maintenance agreement with another lodge who owns a building, you have to go through a bit of a rigmarole to get the space to actually build like a ritual Masonic atmosphere. Like, a lodge is designed to be Masonic-y, but if you're renting, temporarily, let's say it's a shared space, like on Mondays is yoga, you get the room on Wednesdays, every time you have to transform it into a Masonic atmosphere, which, one, kind of cool, but two, I feel like the ability to create an artistic and designed space meticulously is definitely an advantage. So I feel like one of the ideal situations, will I say this hot take, if I want to be the controversial guy, do we own too many buildings? Maybe. But
maybe. I do want to bet.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish your point.
I was going to say that maybe one of the ideal situations is having, lodges join in on buildings so that they can get, like centers that are actually filled out. Like, our lodge building has something going on every day of the week. So if your lodge is sitting empty most days of the week, I feel like there's an opportunity there for sure.
Right. No, I would agree. And I do want to backtrack to something you said earlier, though, about like, you could have a lodge education, you could have like an education event or a social event or something going on instead of hanging ceiling tiles or installing a AV system. And while I agree and I understand your sentiment, we have always said that education does not always need to be Masonic to still be education. And not everybody working on that project, but we all learn something, whether it be a problem-solving skill or a different approach to doing something, or how to wire certain things up, or how to adjust the aim of a projector so it worked off of a 2-foot pipe. We all learned something that day.
I learned to operate a scissor lift to everyone's great fear. Andrew, get down. I start raising myself up like, you can't catch me, I'm going up.
So like that is educational, and there was a whole bunch of us hanging out. So it is also social at the same time. I mean, and I don't think you can discount those kinds of experiences. That's dudes doing dude stuff, and I think that's valuable. Learning how to get bids on a parking lot and a roof, and having to learn all this various stuff I've had to learn about parking lot and flat rubber roofs. I know more about both of them than I ever thought I would now.
Now, this is going to sound mundane to young people as I've grown. Like those commercials where they're like, new homeowners risk of becoming their parents or whatever. It is true. Yeah. It's bad, and it's really bad. But the crazy thing in that is if you look at how people of a certain age hang out, at least my dad, the only way he hangs out with his friends is doing projects on each other's houses. Like, that's the only way that he hangs out. He's like, oh, well, son, I was over at, my buddy Marky's house, and we were installing a garage door, and, we were having beers too, of course, but the spring got a little loose on me, and I was like, it's those things where you're like, wait, what? Are you qualified to do this? Like, I don't know, but that's what we're doing. And you're like, okay. But so it is. I enjoy those, but I was raised like that. Like, I was a chorin household where my dad would always strap tile or, roofing stuff to my back and make me climb up on the roof and stuff. So, like, I like doing stuff like that, but I know that some people, I've heard the classic, I didn't join the lodge to do chores. But if you do have a positive attitude, there are good things about it. Like, I did learn to run wiring and skills that I enjoy, that I know now that I would have never been able to really easily do with a YouTube video necessarily. Right.
And nobody joined the lodge to do chores. However, doing chores is an essential function of the lodge that has to get done. So, none of us are there. None of us were like, I want to become a master mason so I can work on the lodge building. No, we became a master mason because we wanted to be a master mason. And now that we are, we do what we have to do to keep the whole thing going.
You know what I do find interesting with the argument where it's like, I didn't join a lodge to do this or that. What's crazy to me is, usually with that argument, they'll say, I did it to learn about like philosophy and stuff. And it's like, as long as there's that there too, that's great. But then I feel like if every day you only got philosophy lectures, at a certain point, you'd be like, God dang, I wish I could do something different. So everyone likes to complain about their current reality at some point. They'd be like, I'd rather just do this or I'd do that. Maybe I'd rather just have nachos. You know what I mean? Whatever. But so I feel like at the end of the day, I joined Masonry to work. And so if that's working on myself, that's definitely a huge part of Masonry. If that's working in the community, that's a huge part of Masonry. And if that's working with my brothers to support our lodge, I feel like the whole point is to have something to work on, because the art of working, like an industrious little busy bee, has transformative properties as long as you are putting in the hours. You know what I mean? And those can reflect on yourself and everything else as long as you're putting in the right mindset.
And so he gets it.
But at the same time, that doesn't mean there's not a lot of work that a renting lodge has to do either. I don't think they're sitting on their butts. They have other things to work on, you know what I mean? But that's just another thing that comes with owning a building.
You must have cut out for a second. I must have missed something that you said after what you said while I hit the golf clap and stuff. But that's all right. Back to your other question about, is there too many buildings? Consolidating down into less buildings works in an area like Milwaukee. I mean, we've already seen some of that happening, but once you get up north, then you gotta, if you get rid of too many buildings, you have one building servicing people from a 2-hour radius. That's gonna be tough.
The challenge too, I find that with rural lodges is a lot of their original buildings. If you've been to a lot of Wisconsin small towns, the Masonic lodge is usually downtown. Like, it's usually smack dab. Almost in every city I've gone to that's got a rural lodge, I can see City Hall, and somewhere within eyesight is the Masonic lodge in the library. Like, and so I do think that there is something that's really powerful about maintaining those buildings that are in the centers of the community, showing like we're here and we're present and we're here to help in the community. And that is definitely a powerful symbol on top of being a great location to make it easy to get out into your communities and also be a resource. Like you said, you can open up the space to say, we're doing a fish fry downtown as a meeting, like a third space that the community can meet in too. Like the lodge in my dad's hometown in Geneseo, Illinois, the lodge is like right outside of downtown, and they do a fish fry and the community comes out and it's something to do in the community.
Right. Well, and we see that starting to go on again at some lodges, right? Ozaki Lodge is doing their fish fry.
Fish boil or fry?
Every second Friday or whatever.
Oh, yeah, they're back at that. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like every second Friday. So it's like once a month, I think. Got to get up there for one of those yet. I haven't made it up there yet. But, it's that kind of stuff. There's another example of a pro to having a building. You can do stuff like that if you have like a kitchen, I'm not saying somebody who pays maintenance fees at a building with a kitchen couldn't do that, but if you're at a non-Masonic building, you might not have access to a kitchen like that.
Yeah, and the thing is what I do think is really cool though about lodges that rent is they do have the ability to do a lot of cool things that lodges that own buildings can't. Like a lot of them will cover more lodge meals and things like that because without the burden of those capital expenses and stuff, they're able to actually kind of do a lot of stuff. A lot of those lodges are able to donate significantly more heavy to charity. So it's almost like we need renting lodges to do some of the work that it can be hard for a lodge that's kind of tied down by owning the building too. So it actually creates what I would say is like a necessary ecosystem. Because a lodge that owns a building, especially in like an urban setting, is able to then be a home for multiple lodges. And then those lodges, by usually a sale of their building and the less expenses, are able to do some work that it can be more challenging for a building owning lodge to do. So it kind of creates like a symbiotic system within the area.
So starting to head into wrapping this one up, I think the conclusion we can reasonably come to is if you own a building and you like it, great. If you don't own a building and you like it, also great. If you don't like whatever situation you're in, figure it out.
Sorta. Yeah, I mean, I do think I kind of figured that was kind of be what we were going into on this, but I do think it's worth understanding too that there is a point too where that a building can become a pure chain dragging a lodge to its death too. So I do think being overly sentimental about the building itself to the point of self-destruction is also something to be aware of too. Like, I think lodges drag their feet on that a lot of the time because it's hard to give up a clubhouse. But I think that at a certain point, depending on what the circumstances are, like based on the finances you inherited and all that kind of stuff, that shouldn't be necessarily feared switching to renting because it allows opportunities to do other things that you may never been able to do. That a building can be a great clubhouse asset, but it can also be a ball and chain pulling a lodge into the abyss if it's not managed correctly or if it's unsustainable. So there is, I think that's also an important thing within this is to remember that a lodge is not a building. A lodge is a group of people, with a charter to work at their wherever
Right.
they may meet.
Agreed. That's a good way to close her out, I do believe.
Sure. Cool. Well, to our listeners, if you have any opinions on this matter or you want to yell at Matt and I, you can always email us at
timeforfellowship@gmail.com. I am very willing to listen to your yelling at me.
Yep. Otherwise, you can always find us on social media and comment. You can also join us on Discord on Wednesdays, usually around 9:30-ish, depending on if we're running late on recording. You can join us live as well for a hangout in our Discord channel. Link is in the show notes. And till next week. See you guys later.
Yeah. Have a great one, everyone.
Bye.